Thank you, Karen. Always beautiful. I love it. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Nelson. I'm your service associate for today. I'm a 56-year-old lady with black hair, black dress, black shoes. And I think we have some announcements. I guess first will be Al.
Good morning. My name is Al Mork, and I'm me. And that's it. So, and I'm here as the chair of the Social Justice and Action Committee. I want to make you aware that we have our meeting today at noon. And I think, if you're curious about us and what we do and what's on our agenda, you're most welcome to attend. So looking forward to seeing you at noon. Thank you.
And then I believe I have Eileen.
Good morning. I'm Aline King, and I just want to remind you to come next week as well, because my friend of 50 years is going to be speaking on a love tune-up, and we have a special surprise for each one of you, a physical surprise that you'll receive if you come. So please come, because we can all use a little tuning up, and you'll enjoy my friend Kath. Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you all for joining us this morning in person and in Zoom. The modern Unitarian Universalist believes that every individual has the right to explore spirituality and religion for themselves, free from the constraints of dogma or doctrine. We believe all beings are beloved and worthy just because they are. We believe in a future where all are treated equitably, but recognize the inequalities of this world and seek to work to tear down the structures that uphold them. At the center of it all, there is love for our world, love for each other, and love for ourselves. That's by our Reverend Casey Marie Pandel. Our land acknowledgement. We stand upon land that carries the footsteps of many generations of Kumeya'i people. It stretches from the shores of the Pacific Ocean, south to Ensenada, east to the sand dunes of Colorado River and Imperial Valley, and north to Warner Spring Valley. We acknowledge that this fellowship resides on unceded Kumeya'i land and honor the spirit and continuing presence of the Kumeya'i Nation. And now we're going to have our chalice lighting.
Oh, boy.
Yesterday, our distant ancestors gathered around a flame to share their stories and find comfort. Tomorrow, our descendants will gather around a flame, talking of a life we will never know. But today, it is we who gather here around this flame, seeking, believing, and being together. And if you would all rise, if you're willing and able, for our congregational hymn. I have a little reading here I'm supposed to read. The words of Jesus as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty, or give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or without clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." That comes from Matthew 25:34 through 40. So if we can please rise and sing hymn number 8 in the Songs of Grace. I think you'll find it.
Do we need to grab some?
I know where they are. I'll play it through once, so you can.
We gather with our differences, we claim no narrow creed. This faith of ours affirms our life, that life is ours, affirms our faith. Creation is so grand, creation is so grand. The simple and the everyday, these are the precious signs of mysteries and miracles beyond our ken, far from our grasp. The gifts of life are now, the gifts of life are now. For all are held within web so fragile yet so strong. Our ministry to see the needs, to plant with love and tend the seeds of this our cherished faith, of this our cherished faith.
Okay, I do have some joys and concerns. I have a concern for Iris Neal. She received a portion of her colonoscopy and endoscopy results. They found some of the polyps to be possible precancerous. She hasn't spoken with the doctor yet, but she expects to soon. She wants us to pray that all is okay. Carol Schnallbelt has a joy. She wants to thank everyone for the cards, emails, calls while she was recovering. It brightened her up, her day, brightened her for a very hard time she was going through. And then I have a joy. My family adopted a little black kitty from the Humane Society. He's about 12 or 13 weeks old, little solid black kitty. His name is Spider with a Y. All right, so now we'll have Mary Carter Vale and invitation for all ages.
All right, good morning. My name is Mary, and today I'm wearing a very flowery dress. Lots of flowers. I think I've worn this a couple times this summer, because I really love it. It just makes me feel really bright. 5'7", I have graying-reddish hair, and wear glasses today. So I have a story to share with you today, and this is a story that sometimes we share in RE, because it's a really good story about what it really means to be kind. And we're talking about UUs and Bible stories, and I wrote a curriculum once called Bible Stories That Click for UUs, and we used Legos, and this was one the kids really enjoyed. And these stories are used for teaching, right? They're teaching stories. So one day, a lawyer came to Jesus and asked what he needed to do to live forever, or to get into the kingdom of heaven, or to be enlightened. And Jesus asked him what the law of the 10 Commandments said. And the lawyer answered, "You shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself." "Right," said Jesus. And the lawyer asked, "But teacher, who is my neighbor?" In other words, who do I have to treat lovingly? And this is the story that Jesus told the man. Once a man who was a merchant was walking along a lonely stretch of road between Jerusalem and Jericho. Suddenly, a gang of thieves jumped out from the side of the road and surrounded him. "Give us your money," they demanded. "I need my money," he cried. "I have to buy food for myself and my family." One of the thieves attacked the man, and he fell to the ground, groaning. Seeing no one around, the rest of the thieves jumped on the man, and they took everything he had, including his money and even his clothing. They then hit the man several times before leaving him on the side of the road, half dead. A long time passed. Then down the road came a priest, a man of God. That priest looked good. He was wearing a fancy new robe, and he was nice and clean from a recent bath. And when the merchant saw the priest coming, he became excited. "Surely this priest will help me," he thought. But when the priest saw the man lying on the side of the road, he just kept walking and passed him by. After another long time, the merchant saw another man coming down the road. This man was a temple helper, and he looked good. He was well-groomed and had a nice haircut. He wore beautiful, colorful clothing and had a winning smile. Once again, the merchant became hopeful. "Surely this man will help me," he thought. But when the temple helper saw him, he saw this merchant lying on the side of the road. He just kept on walking and passed right by him. A long time passed. Flies buzzed around the man who was dying from his injuries. Luckily, someone else was coming down the road. He was a Samaritan riding on his donkey. Now, the people of Samaria were not friendly with the people of this man's country. They were sworn enemies of one another. But the Samaritan man did not hesitate when he saw the man lying on the ground. He didn't stop to think about whether he should help him because of where he was from or what group he belonged to. He saw the man needed help, and he felt compassion. The Samaritan took healing oil and wine from his own bag, cleaned the man's wounds, and bound them up with bandages made from the cloth of his shirt. He covered him with a robe, and he gave the man a drink of water and helped him onto his donkey. Slowly, for the merchant was in great pain and the road was long, they walked to the next town. There, the Samaritan found an inn and asked the innkeeper to give him what was necessary to make the man comfortable. The next day, the Samaritan gave money to the innkeeper to pay for the wounded man to stay at the inn until he got better. The Samaritan then promised to come back in a few days and pay whatever else was needed to bring the man back to health. When Jesus finished telling the story, he asked the lawyer, "Which of these men acted like a neighbor to the man who fell among thieves?" The lawyer said, "The one who showed kindness." "Yes," said Jesus, "go and do the same." One of the many teaching stories that are shared in the Bible. And that one I feel is really appropriate for nowadays, for us all to remember that compassion knows no bounds. We need to be compassionate. So today in RE, we're going to go be compassionate with our garden and paint our tiny little library. So I hope you'll come back and visit us. Let's see, we're up to it. Looks like it's just me and Gwenny. So, all right. Well, thank you for listening, and we're heading off to go play in the dirt.
If you guys would stand if you can and sing hymn number 1051, We Are. It's in the teal hymnal, I believe.
For each child star rises, sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our brother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We are sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We are seekers of truth and keepers of faith, makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandfather's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God, our mothers of courage and fathers of time. Daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We are sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We are seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are Father's prayers, and our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
While we're getting coordinated with the screen, I'm Tom Brower, for those that don't know me. Member here and guest speaker this morning. There we are. Okay, clicker in hand. I'm set. The Bible is the world's best-known book and sacred text. And probably every single one of you already knew that. But what you may not know is that almost 100 chapters out of the Bible contain significant parallel passages. That is material that rewrites earlier portions of the Bible. And here's the really cool part. When you compare these parallel passages, you often get a glimpse into how the sausage is made. And for you vegans and vegetarians, maybe you might prefer the metaphor of a peek behind the curtain. And that's exactly what we're going to do this morning. We're going to take a peek behind the curtain of one of the Bible's most famous passages. I'll forewarn you that we're going to get into the details just a bit. It might feel a little bit like a classroom some of the time. But I think if you'll stick with me through this short journey of discovery, that you'll come away with both the fascinating and the inspiring. At least that's what I'm aiming for. To start, let's see. There we go. I was hitting the pointer button. Sorry. To start, let's use our imaginations a little bit. With the help of this artist's rendering, try to picture yourself in this biblical scene. See yourself among the ancient Israelites newly escaped from Egypt, gathered around Mount Sinai covered with fire and smoke. Feel your sandaled feet on the hardened ground, and the fearsome sight overwhelming your senses. See the lightning, hear the thunder, and the blast of a heavenly trumpet. Watch as Moses, summoned to the mountaintop by God, slowly ascends until he's obscured from view. Suddenly, a thunderous voice from the midst of the fire, the very voice of God, pronouncing the Ten Commandments. Finally, when Moses comes back down the mountain, he's carrying 2 tablets of stone, etched by the very finger of God with these 10 Commandments. Now that's powerful stuff. And an unforgettable story meant to convey the authority and the permanence of God's law. Stick a mental pin in that, just for now. How many of you have ever seen the pretty famous 1956 movie, The Ten Commandments? Wow, most of you. How many of you have ever seen one of the monuments constructed all around our country with the Ten Commandments on them? Anybody ever seen? Well, a few of you. How many of you are aware that several of our states, including Texas and Louisiana and a few more that are planning on it, passed legislation requiring all public schools, K through state university, to post the Ten Commandments? Yeah, just about everybody knows about that story. If you answered yes to any of these questions, you would have every reason to think, hit the wrong button again. There we go. You would have every reason to think that this is what was spoken by God on Mount Sinai. And etched into those ancient tablets of stone, because this is how the Ten Commandments are typically depicted. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, honor thy mother and father, thou shalt not steal, and all the rest. But this is what you might call an executive summary of the Ten Commandments, written in King James English to give it that little extra something. The actual 10 Commandments are 4 times longer. Yep, 4 times longer. Now, and I don't mean there are more than 10 of them, I just mean they're a lot wordier, the real things. And here's something else you might find even more surprising. The Bible contains more than one version of the 10 Commandments. These versions are one example of those parallel passages I was referring to earlier. And here's where we're going to stop and take a closer look. First, I need to lay a little groundwork. Not everyone is equally familiar with the Bible. I know some of us have quite a lot of background, some don't have much. The earliest version of the 10 Commandments is found in the book of Exodus. That's the second book of the Bible and the second book of the Jewish Torah. Exodus primarily narrates the Israelite exodus from Egypt and the giving of the law out at Mount Sinai. The other version of the 10 Commandments we're going to look at is found in the book of Deuteronomy. That's the 5th book of the Bible and the final book of the Jewish Torah. It's so named because it's considered the second law. That's the literal understanding of Deuteronomy. And called that because Moses narrated it on the edge of the promised land and repeated the law that was given at Mount Sinai. So in that sense, a second law. But really just a repetition of the first one. Now there's general agreement in biblical scholarship that this second version of the 10 Commandments was composed centuries later than the earlier version from Exodus. And here's the most startling thing of all. When you compare side by side the later version from Deuteronomy with the earlier version in Exodus, there are about a dozen significant changes. And I mean significant. This is not spelling or word order or things like that that just don't matter at all. Real changes. So you heard that right. These holiest of all words, thundered from the mountaintop by the voice of God, etched in stone by the finger of God, then given to Moses, were changed by later writers in about a dozen places. Now pause for just a moment and ask yourself, what could possibly have been so important, so compelling, that later Jewish editors would dare touch these most sacred words? Let's find out. This is the 4th commandment about Sabbath keeping. It's that executive summary version I was telling you about, and that you'll find in monuments around the country. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 8 short words. In this case, the actual commandment is 10 times longer. 10 times longer. And here it is. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Now, there's not enough room on the screen to show you this alongside the later version from Deuteronomy because it's even longer than this. But here's the later version with the differences highlighted in blue and red. The blue highlighted changes all serve to strengthen this command in some way. Notice how this is done. First, they substituted a slightly stronger word, observe, that's the very first word, for the original term, remember. And then they added the phrase, as the Lord your God commanded you. Kind of gives the commandment a little extra emphasis, right? Next, your livestock in the earlier version becomes or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock. What do you suppose is going on there? Not too hard to figure, I think. I'd say human nature being what it is, you can easily see why there was a need to close any loopholes around what constituted livestock. Altogether, these edits tell us that maintaining strict Sabbath observance may have been a problem at times. So the command was made more forceful, and some loopholes were explicitly plugged. But the major difference, and the one I want you to focus on, comes last and is highlighted in red. The underlying rationale for the Sabbath command has been completely changed. Utterly and completely changed. You can't say that this was like a paraphrase of the other because it's entirely different. The reason for Sabbath keeping in the earlier account was rooted in the creation story. In 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day, he rested. A sacred pattern built into creation itself. But look what happens here in the later version. The creation and resting on the seventh day is nowhere in sight. Not even a hint of it is left. The Sabbath is recast as more of a social institution, a time to ensure rest for all, with special emphasis on rest for slaves, the most vulnerable people in the social hierarchy of the day. Exodus, it's all about cosmic order and divine example. Deuteronomy, it's all about compassion, human dignity, social justice. With another mental pin, stick one in that while we move on to the 10th commandment. Here's the earlier version found in Exodus. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female slave, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Some high-level observations first. Consider the scope of this commandment. It uses exclusively male-directed language. Honestly, not a great surprise. Neighbor's wife, his slave, his animal. This tells us a lot about the highly patriarchal society that we're peering into. It was a man's world, and primarily men who owned things, and that's the way it was. Next, notice the structure of this command. House in this context carries the idea of household and not a physical dwelling. It's an all-inclusive term that for anything that belonged to one's neighbor. What follows is a list of what's included in a typical neighbor's household back in that day. And notice that the order of this ownership list isn't arbitrary. They're purposely ranked in a descending order of value, from wife to slaves to animals. With the slaves, it's male slave first, then female. With the animals, it's ox first, then donkey. Now let's look at both passages together. The older one from Exodus is at the top of the screen, and the parallel passage from Deuteronomy, the later one, is on the bottom. As you might have noticed, typically the later one is longer than the earlier one, as things get added rather than taken away. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor desire your neighbor's house, his field, his male slave or his female slave, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Okay, so pretty much the same, right? Not supposed to desire your neighbor's stuff. Both use male-directed language exclusively. And the list of the neighbor's stuff is still in descending order of value. But just as obvious, the later editors have tinkered with this one a little bit too. Did you spot the one brand new element by chance? Field. All right, very good. Field was added, and it's been coupled with house, which in this context, unlike the earlier version, does mean home or physical dwelling. So after the reference to the wife, the rest of the neighbor's belongings are now arranged in 3 tidy couplets: house and field, male and female slave, ox and donkey. But why add field and change the sense of house? Asking these kinds of questions is actually my favorite part when comparing parallel passages. It's kind of like solving a puzzle. But what would motivate the later writers to make such a deliberate edit? Why bother? Why not just leave good enough alone? The answer is something very substantial, as it turns out. The ancient Israelites were once a nomadic people. They lived in tents and moved around. They didn't build homes. And they didn't own fields because they didn't yet have established agriculture. Eventually, they did settle into cities and towns, and the production of such things as wine and olive oil became central to their economy. So the fields that produced such bounty could not be overlooked in a list of the neighbor's stuff you're not supposed to covet. But by far, I'd say, the most important changes relate to the neighbor's wife. In 2 very intentional ways, though subtle, the later version separates out the wife from the neighbor's other belongings. Most obvious, before anything else is said, the wife is now mentioned right up front. In addition, the wife is differentiated from the other items by a different word for covet. Did you catch that one? Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't desire your neighbor's other stuff. The terms in English and the underlying Hebrew are roughly synonymous, but they are different words. So this is not just some English translator putting this in there. They really are different words in the Hebrew. And this was done intentionally to add a distinction, to create some space, so to speak, between one's wife and one's other belongings. So what to make of these changes? I think it's evident that the later writer was at least to some extent uncomfortable with the relative status of the wife in the earlier version in Exodus. The remedy was a slight but clear upgrade in which the wife is distinguished from all the other belongings. I don't think it's too much to say, although it is just my judgment, that in this change, women were being given a boost in their social status. So just like the changes to the Sabbath commandment, social justice concerns seem to have been the likely driver behind the most significant changes made to the 10th commandment. Okay, this is an easy one, but if you're keeping score, we now have 2 data points that indicate an editorial pattern behind what's going on here, being driven by social justice. Now, 2 data points are something, but we probably need a few more to confirm this hunch about an editorial pattern. And as it turns out, it's there and it's clear if you read closely. If you look through the book of Deuteronomy, you will see numerous additional social justice upgrades, as I like to call them, for both women and slaves. In all 3 of these life situations in which women were at their most vulnerable, as debt slaves, captives of war, or divorced, Deuteronomy improved upon earlier laws, or at least added safeguards where none had existed before. One example, the earlier law in Exodus stipulated that male debt slaves were to be released in the 7th year. But I'm guessing you know where this is going. The female slaves were not released. Deuteronomy changed that so that all debt slaves, male and female, were released in the 7th year. And unlike the earlier legislation, Deuteronomy stipulated that the slave was not to be released empty-handed. Supply them liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, your winepress, it stated, remembering that you were once slaves in Egypt. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that patriarchy or slavery was dismantled some 2,500 years ago. Obviously not. But a gradually increasing set of protections for women and slaves was a noticeable trend in the ancient Near East. And the changes made to the 10 Commandments reflect that evolution. Thanks for sticking with me through the weeds. It's time for some final thoughts. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Martin Luther King Jr. I would like to propose to you that in these upgrades to the 10 Commandments, which improve the treatment of slaves and the status of women, we're witnessing the arc of the moral universe thousands of years ago, bending ever so slightly towards justice. And that is a beautiful thing. But these immortal words also come with a critical disclaimer. The arc of the moral universe may bend towards justice, but it doesn't bend on its own. Barack Obama. If the bend toward justice were fated or inevitable, then there would be no reason for us to lean our collective shoulders into social justice work. But we know it's not preordained. And there will always be opposition from forces that want to conserve the status quo or worse, as there surely were when those ancient Jewish sages had the courage to modify the most sacred words of their faith, and in so doing bend the arc of the moral universe in favor of the marginalized of their day. Those who work for justice today, all of us included, stand on their shoulders and the shoulders of all throughout history, many of whom who've even paid the ultimate price for what they've done. The net result of all this justice work is that thankfully we have come a long way. With that in mind, I'd like you to consider how these 2 commandments we've looked at today might be further updated to match the moral progress of the last 2,500 years. Now, okay, we could really run wild with this little thought experiment. So I'm just going to stick to 2 fairly obvious, modest proposals. First, the highly patriarchal, exclusively male-directed language of the 10th commandment, that's the one about coveting, would be made fully inclusive and apply explicitly to all. Second, consider the issue of slavery. From cover to cover, the Bible treats slavery as normative. The morality of the practice is never questioned, much less condemned. The 2 commands we've looked at today illustrate this reality. So, instead of just prescribing a day of rest for slaves, or saying don't covet your neighbor's slaves, an updated Ten Commandments would probably prohibit slavery altogether. I know, outlaw slavery, pretty low-hanging fruit these days, right? Yes, there are many dark corners where it still lives on. But at least I'll just ad-lib here a little bit. At least it's officially illegal in virtually every country of the world. But imagine the suffering that millions of wretched souls would have been spared if even this level of moral clarity had existed 2,500 years ago. Perhaps the ultimate takeaway for us is this: moral clarity isn't etched in stone somewhere. It is built over time through empathy, human experience, reason, and dialogue. And as it builds, people of courage act to bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. Thank you. Gotta make sure I don't take Laura's papers away.
Thank you, Tom. Now we will do our offering. We are fellowship supported entirely by the voluntary generosity of our members and friends. We greatly appreciate our faithful pledgers who continue to keep up the monthly contributions. It's easy to contribute to our virtual plate today. The link can be found in the chat box, and it will take you directly to the donation location. And we gratefully accept your generous donations during the musical interlude. jazzy. Okay, Tom is going to lead us in our closing hymn. I believe you wrote it yourself, right?
Yeah, this required just a little bit of explanation. Maybe a bit mystified what's in the order of service. So here's the deal. I love to do creative writing. I wrote the lyrics to this song, and I turned all the knobs and configured all the music parameters. But there are now AI platforms that will produce finished products, and that's what this is. I hope you can overlook that there was a machine involved in part of this, but our UU values, our circle song, and many of the things we do here inspired this song. I have to give thanks to several people. Tom Biggert is actually the one that first thought of this idea and encouraged me to do this because he knew I liked to tinker around with creating songs. And he kept bugging me about it, and if he hadn't, it probably would have never happened. I also want to give thanks to Margot and her monthly poetry workshop, which even though I don't write poetry per se, but I kind of do. She'll scold me for that. I'm there to have my creative energy stirred and inspired. So thank you, Margot, for that, for her monthly wonderful poetry workshop. And finally, the way that Casey ends her benedictions, with that long string of Ashe, Shalom, Namaste, and a few others, that inspired the song title and a fair amount of the content of the song. So Ashe, Shalom, Namaste. You're going to hear the version that I created. Hopefully, I hope you'll enjoy it and sing along.
That was awesome and easy to follow. All right, and then we'll extinguish our chalice. Our closing words are, our faith, like a light, illuminates the path before us so that we can face hurt with love, cultivate compassion, live humbly in community, and confront despair with the awe of life. Though our flame is extinguished, our faith shines bright before us. And that's by James Galasinski. Thank you all for being here today. After our circle song, we'll have a 10-minute break. Then please be seated for our community gathering. And after our community gathering, you're invited to go to the salon for refreshments. You don't have to hold hands for this if you don't want to, just to let everybody know.